It is, yeah. It's coming up on 2 a.m.
Yeah.
Oh, 2 a.m. Oh, good people.
Great.
Okay, I'm just going for a quick coffee and I'll be back. See you soon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye. (10:45 a.m. in Pakistan. Great. Talk about a global community.
Okay, we still have 15 minutes to go.
Greetings from Pakistan.
So please, you can write where are you from. Let's introduce yourself to the our guest speakers. You can write in the chat box. So we have people from different countries, so they can read from the chat box. So where are you from and what are you teaching?
Tunisia, Honduras, Egypt, Malaysia, Pakistan. Wow. All over the world. 6:45 in Tunisia. Wow. Great. Kurdistan, wow, Bahrain, Odisha, India, great. Very interesting indeed.
Salman, can you hear me, Salman? So please, could you please switch off your camera? I tried to disable the camera for attendees. I don't know, it doesn't work with me.
Sure, please, sure. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Oh, thank you. So please, we request everyone, to switch off your camera, mute yourself, and then we'll give the floor to every speaker to speak 20-25 minutes, and after that we'll open the floor. You can delay them to the end of the free topic or presentations. And okay, about presentations, about PowerPoint, recording, a certificate will be emailed. I will share attendance and feedback in the everything. So please do not ask anything related to certificate or attendance or feedback. Okay, we'll do it everything. Okay. So try to focus on the content. Ask questions related to the content for our guest speakers. We still have 10 minutes to go.
Yeah.
I'm back on again.
Great.
So participants still join us. Seems like.
Hi there. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Tatiana.
Is it possible to join this meeting only to, well, the echo is so bad. What do I do so that there's no echo?
I cannot hear you.
You
Could you
cannot
say it
hear me?
again? Yeah, could you say it again?
Is it possible to join the meeting only using the phone?
Yes, of course you can. You can join us from any device as an attendee.
I cannot install
There is no
Teams
need.
on the PC.
There is no need to install. There is no need to install. Just click on the link if you have the link, and then you can share. You can join from browser. There is no need to install it.
There are three options. Either to
Yeah,
download.
there is no need to download. You can join from browser. No need. No problem.
Okay.
So please, I would like to ask the attendees to switch off your camera. We still have now 5 minutes to go. So kindly requested, please. I'm requested the attendees to switch off your camera, please.
Mike, I don't know how you are so clear. I'm rather blurred and you're very, very clear.
Yeah, you got very high-speed internet or something.
Yeah. What a difference. Yeah. Mine seems to be very slow. Can you hear me okay?
You can
Yeah,
hear
we
you
can.
okay.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay.
There's a lag with me as well.
Right.
drinking my morning coffee.
Yeah, I've got one too. Cheers.
Cheers.
I got my water.
Please close this. I cannot even find where it is.
Do you know, I discovered a difference in generations. The older generation expects technology not to work, and the younger generation expects technology to work all the time.
Yes.
So that means the younger generation don't have a backup plan.
No, none whatsoever. That's right.
It's going to work. It's just going to work.
I honestly think every time I switch on Zoom or Teams or anything else, it's not going to work. Always. It's always a miracle when it goes well.
Yeah.
So, James, are you an English teacher in Canada?
I am. I'm actually an administrator at the moment, but I've been teaching for about 22 years now.
Yeah, yeah. And Mike, am I right? You have a language school?
Yeah, I have a language school here on Lesbos Island in Greece.
Oh, nice. Oh, how lovely. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it is. It is. And Sharon, I know you're everywhere. You know, I've seen a lot of your work and stuff. Are you actually in Portugal?
No, I'm in England. I'm in the north of England. I'm in Newcastle.
Newcastle, cool.
The frozen north.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
The frozen north.
It is the frozen north, where the sun shines every week once.
We have somebody who did their master's in Newcastle.
Sorry?
Oh, I just see in the chat that we have someone saying that they've done their master's in Newcastle.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. Oh, yes, I had.
I lived in Loughborough for about 4 or 5 years.
Oh,
Leicestershire.
my son went to Loughborough University.
Oh wow, so did I.
Did you?
Yeah.
Liam Collins.
Jeez, what? Oh, obviously he's.
It's a sprint. He was a 100-meter hurdler.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. He loved Loughborough. I loved Loughborough.
Oh, I loved it. It was awesome. I chose I'm really into small areas. I don't know why. I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, but I was always living in suburbia, not in main city areas.
Yes.
So I've always chosen suburbs and neighborhoods. So I really enjoyed Loughborough. It was really good.
Yes. Yeah. I had an interview for Loughborough when I went to university, and it was between Surrey and Loughborough. And when I went to Loughborough, it was snowing, and I thought, oh no, Surrey's going to be warmer, so I went to Surrey instead. But I think Loughborough would have been good.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think 1 minute to go. Okay, good morning from Saudi Arabia. Okay. So we have now 75 here. People are coming, joining us.
It's really impressive.
Yeah.
The numbers.
Myanmar, wow. Hi.
There you are.
Wow, all these places I want to visit. Wow.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of English Language Center, University of Technology, Applied Sciences, Ibri-Oman, we would like to welcome you all to our ELT Colloquium, Special Needs of students during COVID-19. And let's all welcome our guest speakers from different countries, from UK, from Canada, and Greece. And we would like to start with, it's a great honor and pleasure to start with Ms. Sharon Collins. And let me introduce her. She is speaking to us or talking to us from UK. She is a British linguist who speaks 6 languages. She is an EFL teacher who specializes in pronunciation and communication. She was editor for EFLmagazine.com for 2 years, and now she works like freelance, giving talks and delivering courses to EFL teachers throughout the world. Now, she's talking about the etiquette of online learning, and I think in her talk, she's going to discuss several rules which should be implemented to ensure effective teaching and learning. And these rules or suggestions will be discussed in her 25 minutes talk. So all the stage for you, Sharon.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I think you are my biggest audience. I've never spoken to so many people from so many countries before, and it's just amazing. I'm so delighted to be here today because I lived in Oman for 8 years, and I never got to Ibri, but I did go to Nizwa, and my husband was a construction engineer on the new Tabriz University. So today I'd like to talk to you about the etiquette of online teaching. I started teaching online just before COVID-19 started and just before lockdown. Tell you that it changed my life. For me, it is a massive advantage. Before COVID, I was teaching only in my city, which is in the north of England. And I'm in England, so not so many people want to learn English. But as soon as I started going online, the world was my school. And it's just amazing. I'd also like to have you that I've had my second COVID jab. So actually now I can travel. So today I'm going to talk about the etiquette of online teaching. And etiquette, if you look in a dictionary, means correct behavior in a certain situation. And if you think about it, as teachers, we have to engage our students. And as students, they have to listen and watch what we're saying. And it's a two-way thing. So first of all, I'd like to talk about you, teachers. And I have a question for you. Have you ever thought that you are a film star? Well, you are. You're a film star every time you go online. But just imagine the film star, they have hair, they do makeup. Those things are not important to me. But what is important when we engage our students is lighting. Now, I have sat in some meetings where you can only see half a person's face because they are in shadow. And I would like to show you this lovely gadget I have. Watch this. That's with the light off, and that's with the light behind me on. So lighting is extremely important because we want to engage our students. The next thing which is important is the fact that when we sit teaching, our students see half our body, and yet we have to give twice as much personality because we can't walk around. We can't shout very loud. We just have to sit in front of a camera, but still give twice our personality. So it's very important that we sit up straight and allow our voice to travel. Okay. As you know, I'm a specialist in pronunciation, but I'm also very, very interested in body language. And these things here, our hands, are extremely important because our hands and our gestures reinforce what our voice is saying. So if we sit like this or like this, our students will not be so engaged. as if we show them as much of our body as we can and use our arms. So that's what I wanted to say to all of you, that you are all film stars. And I hope you keep that in mind. Okay, let's talk about engaging students now. And I think engaging students online is very, very difficult. And I want to tell you about the biggest mistake I made when I started online teaching. And that is, I assumed that all my students would know exactly what to do. And I was totally wrong. And I have had some crazy experiences online. For example, one student hung upside down for the whole lesson, and he couldn't put his camera the right way up. That was quite weird. Okay, so with this in mind, I have written some guidelines, and I'm going to go through these guidelines point by point to tell you what I now explain to my students before we start a course, so we all understand what's happening to us. Okay, so the first one is email. At the beginning of a course, I give my students my email address, and I'm going to give it to you now, and you'll understand why at the end. Could you please write down, and I'll write it in the chat here. My email is Sharon, and this is a spelling, at Sharon Collins .co.uk. And there's my email address. Okay, at the beginning of every lesson, I say to my students, okay, there's my email address. At the end of the session, I would like you to send me an email and tell me 5 things which have helped you during this lesson. Just 5. I call them takeaways. So at the end of the session, would all the people here send me an email? It will be a joy to speak to you, and tell me the 5 things which you have taken away from this course. That already starts to engage the students. At the beginning of every session, I always ask them also to just say hello to me and say where they are from. That also starts engaging the students. Okay, then I ask them to look at their cameras. Now, I cannot tell you how many times I have taught somebody's head like this, or they are sitting in a sofa and they are disappearing, or I can't see their hands. All of these things are very important when you're a linguist. I have to see people's lips. So I always ask people, will they always also sit up straight? Okay. I also tell students, I use what's called signposting. I tell students at the beginning what we're going to do. In the middle, I check in with them. And at the end, I give a summary. And in the middle, I often say, are you with me? Do you understand? Could you give me a show of hands if you understand what I'm talking about, or if you agree with me on this point, give me a show of hands. And I should have a hand from everyone on the course. And if I haven't, I ask it again, so that students get to realize that throughout the lesson, I'm going to be checking in on them. Okay. Now, let me tell you about the biggest enemy of online teaching, and that is distraction. Distraction in so many different ways. I always know if there is somebody behind a student's camera, because the student will go like that and look up, or like that, or like that, because someone is in the room. And at that point, if I ask a question, the student can never give an answer because they lost their concentration. I ask students to be prepared. You have no idea. Sometimes I say, write this down. And everybody starts moving because they've forgotten their pencil. It's so simple. And yet, think about it. When you travel to university, you have your bag, you have everything in your bag. Sometimes you're sitting at home and you think, oh my goodness, I have a lecture in 1 minute, and you run in front of the camera and you're not prepared. And when you need to write things down, you need to leave. Which brings me to the point about cameras being switched on and cameras being switched off. I insist, if possible, all cameras should be switched on at all times, because when a camera is switched off, where have you gone? I don't know where you've gone. Are you here? Are you not here? Are you looking on Facebook? Are you sending an email to somebody? I don't know. So it's important to keep the camera on. And some funny things have happened. For example, one friend of mine, a teacher, she told me that one of her students switched the camera off, and she didn't know if the student was there or not. So finally, she phoned the student, and he said, "Oh, I was hungry. I went for a sandwich." These things happen. Also, one of my students told me in a mathematics lesson, if some of the students don't understand a question when they are asked, they switch off their camera and send a message saying, "bad connection," so they don't have to answer the question. So keeping your camera on is very, very important. Also, move. Please, as students, ask your students to move, because when they sit like this, I never know if the camera is frozen. And so if you just move or nod your head sometimes, it helps the teacher to know that you are there. Punctuality. At university, a lecture starts at 10 o'clock. Online, a lesson starts at 10 o'clock. So why do people arrive all the time, later and later? 10 minutes, 5 minutes. I have a rule. If the student isn't online after 10 minutes, I don't allow them to enter the room. It's quite tough, but it works. Okay, let's go back to distraction. Sometimes the students forget to mute. Actually, I don't like mute because I like to be able to ask questions quickly without people having to mute their cameras. But anyway, I've had washing machines going. I've had people shouting in the background, people on phones in the background, children running around, people walking in and out. This is all terrible distraction for our students. So I also always ask them, if possible, to have a private room. Now, sometimes you cannot stop children running around. That's understandable. But if possible, try and find a babysitter for 1 hour. Food. I am not joking. One day I was teaching face-to-face, and a student of mine had a great big bowl of soup, and they started eating the soup. And there was only this person and me. What do? Sit and wait while the person's eating their soup, or drinking a great big bottle of water? If you're hungry, eat before the lesson. If you're thirsty, drink before the lesson. Why do it during the lesson? Somebody started eating a great big apple one day. How can you speak when you're chewing an apple? So all of these things just simply drive me mad. Summary. I like to summarize at the end of a session to make sure that people have followed during the session. And it simply works for me. Okay. Clothes. I have people who were in the shower 1 minute before the lesson, and they arrive at the lesson and the hair is wet. I have had people with no t-shirt, so they look as if they're wearing no clothes. These things are all crazy. So what I did was I wrote a list of guidelines, and I think you have your own guidelines. You understand what happens to you. But it's very difficult during the lesson to say, "Excuse me, would you mind not eating? Excuse me, could you tell me if you're there or not?" So to write some guidelines beforehand and present them to the students helps me very much. Okay, I'm just checking my chat here, and I've got a couple of people who said what you've said is very, very true, and you totally agree. I'm very glad about that. I don't have very much more to say about that, except that online learning is here to stay. Going back to face-to-face would be amazing. I am teaching now face-to-face, and when I go in a room and see students, I want to hug every single one of them because you are there with them. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to explain as well was, it's very important to be calm as a teacher, because it's very important for the teachers also to be calm. So just before the lesson, I calm myself down, and then before the lesson, I chat to the students for a little while to calm them down, because in a very calm brain state, both of us can teach and learn at the same time. So my talk was very short today, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions. I'm quite a fast speaker, and I seem to have filled in the time very quickly. Could I have any questions?
Okay, thank you, Sharon, very much for your amazing, insightful talk. Actually, we'll delay up the questions to the end of the, until we finish with the two other speakers.
Okay.
Okay, guys, if you have questions, please, you can postpone them to the end, or delay them up to the end of the, when we finish with our guest speakers. Okay, now, thank you very much for a really amazing, insightful talk. And now, guys, let's welcome our second guest speaker from Canada. He's talking to us from Canada. Okay, James Papple, and I'm going to introduce him to you. Okay, James Papple is the interim associate director at the York University English Language Institute, and is the current chair of TESOL's Affiliate Network and Professional Council. He is the co-chair of TESOL Ontario College and University Committee, and is a board member of the Center of Canadian Language Benchmarks, CCLB. And today his topic is about providing differentiated support for English for academic students. So the floor is yours, James.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and let me see if I can share my my slides with you.
Okay, they are coming. Yeah, I think.
Okay. I hope that you can see them okay. Yeah, great. What I'd like to talk about a little bit today, is the need for effective approaches for identifying English language learners who may be experiencing a different sort of context than they would if they were here face to face. One of the things that I think Sharon touched on was the idea that we have these students who are experiencing different sorts of things. I've also had students who've attended in their bathrobes, or less. And who've had some very interesting experiences. And so I wanted to talk about some of the students that we had over the last year or so. We've been actually, I guess, online a little longer than the pandemic. Some of our programs have sort of predate that, but we've had several students over that period of time who actually had differing needs, whether it was issues with mental health or a visual or, impairment, or a learning difficulty, and the extra challenges that go along with being in an online environment. And so I think, a little bit of our context. I happen to be, as you heard, from York University. We're one of the largest universities in Canada in terms of our size. I'll skip, I think, playing the video just to avoid having any technical issues. But we have 5 different programs that bring in students from over 50 different countries, and as we look at that group, the varying needs that they will have are quite different. And so when I look at before the pandemic, Uh, we offered a variety of supports to students depending on what they were looking for. We had student accessibility services. We had the Office of Student Community Relations, which could deal with, students who are having mental health issues. We had the student insurance provider who could provide students with different, mental health resources, and of course, physical health as well. And then we had our own in-house personnel and staff who could deal with a variety of issues. Now, when we changed, and we changed to fully online within a day, that brought about, of course, a lot more stresses on the system, and then, of course, stresses on the student. And so when we look at the materials that we had once we went into the pandemic, we had students on our LMS, which was Moodle. Then we had, of course, our teachers through Zoom. We had student portal accounts. Then we had teachers who found that in order to make the online environment work, they needed to bring in things like Kahoot or, a variety of other programs. And so we had all of these other accounts that were there. And then, of course, having students use a variety of different browsers all created a variety of challenges. And so that made the difficulties that much harder. So when students were face-to-face, they could go down, they could seek help easily and get support on all of those different factors. But given that the pandemic meant that most of our students were actually overseas and were not here face-to-face, they wouldn't be able to access that same amount of support. And what was compounding that issue is if students actually had some special needs themselves, they often would encounter, at least at the beginning stages of the pandemic, difficulty accessing some of those supports that were there in the past. And so what we would see is that not everything went as easily online as our language programming. Some services were limited or not available at all. And so that made things particularly difficult when it came to dealing with students who had accessibility concerns. Normally, they would go down to the office, they would fill out a form, complete a test, to see, submit some doctor's papers, and then receive accommodations. But that office was largely closed for the first few months of the pandemic, and then when they were able to open up, they no longer could process the materials the same way. And so students who had anxiety issues or even things such as eating disorders that they used to be able to go through and get additional support, suddenly weren't able to get some of those services in the same way. And that's really, I think, unfortunate. And so what we had to do in order to make sure that we could fill in those gaps was look at ways that we could offer different levels of support. And so one of the things that we wanted to quickly do was to make sure that we had, a warmer, more engaging atmosphere. There's something inherently impersonal with being in Zoom and in this little square, and not being able to reach out to people, and maybe only seeing the upper body of people. We had students that went through for months only to find out that they'd actually were pregnant and were about to deliver at the end, and of course no one was aware. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to provide a warm environment around all of the language classes that we had. And so we really invested in our own community leaders, which is a group of students from the undergrad courses who meet regularly with all of our international language students. And so we actually upped the number of community leaders that we had in order to make sure that there was more support, more peer networking opportunities that were available. Because one of the things that we found was that while we have staff that can deal with a variety of issues, the first point of contact and the people who often students are going to confide in when they're dealing with stresses, that are acute to being online and thousands of miles apart from each other, was that they would often reach out to their peer group, either to community leaders or to their other classmates. And so we wanted to make sure that level was also strengthened as a way of sort of moving things forward. And then when it came time to looking at the actual experience of students in the classroom, we've had difficulties, of course, with students not being able to connect, being very frustrated that there's a firewall that's preventing them access to some of the materials, they have a device that maybe doesn't allow for them to interact with our learning management system. So, for example, sometimes iPads have limited ability to be used in the class. And so in order to be able to still provide that level of instruction, we wanted to be able to look at what we could do in terms of differentiation. We often talk about best practices in the classroom, and I think one of the bright spots of the pandemic was having the ability to be able to say that there are some best practices out there for online. We need to learn what they are, and we need to be able to think about whether those best practices are best practices for all of the students or just for some of the students who are in particular need. And one of the things that we found was that typically a best practice for one is a best practice for all, but that we can offer support with differentiation as well. And so we did have, some training around, offering differentiated support. It's not something that I think teachers are often very comfortable with. Often, I think, including myself, we tend to write up our lesson plan, with sort of a one-size-fits-all approach. But if we begin to broaden out and look at ways of looking at something beyond a single objective, and looking at ways of making that lesson a little bit different so that other students can participate equally, then great. And so what I think we found was that differentiation ended up being the norm while we were online, that having opportunities for alternative assessment, having a more inquiry-based approach, allowing students to be more autonomous in their learning, allowed us to go into new areas. And one of those areas that we began to explore, I think, more fully in the last year is we are a school that is a UNESCO school that supports the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's surprising that that type of content during the pandemic was something that allowed students to feel more connected and more grounded. They were able to bring in not only their own perspective, but also a global and local perspective as well. And through that, they could differentiate their own learning pathways and take more control over their learning. And that really opened up a lot of things for our students. And it also allowed, I think, quite dramatically, because of the nature of the SDGs, it allowed for more interdepartmental collaboration. And so one of the things that we often hear from students, when we've done surveys, in Ontario about students who are international, they often will say that less than 50% of them have a Canadian friend, which is something that has been heartbreaking in the past. But by having projects that relate to more than just our own department, but to other faculties as well, allowed for a more collaborative nature and allowed students to make more connections than we saw prior to the pandemic, which was sort of counterintuitive in its thinking. And so, by exploring some of those things, we have English language learners who then have a variety of different literacies, and then who can explore a variety of different skills as a result and really push themselves in different ways. And so when we think about differentiating the materials, we thought about what content can we differentiate. Besides having the teacher as the input, what ways are we able to have students bring in their own content and bring in things that matter to them and kind of co-create and create a space that works for them. And one of the things that we noticed that as we began this approach was that the number of students who were saying that they had issues with anxiety in the past began to wane, which was again sort of counterintuitive to the atmosphere. At the beginning, we had a lot of students who were saying, "I'm not comfortable with being in an online environment. I will wait and come back when things are face to face." But with the students that remained, those sorts of issues gradually gave way as we began to differentiate and look for alternatives to connect with students. And so that was something that I think was really interesting for us. We looked at ways to differentiate the process, how we can, structure different types of activities. And we also looked to differentiate what those products might be as well. And allowing students to work at their own pace and to hand in materials that would fit. And so, as I mentioned, we've taken on a more alternative assessment approach during the pandemic, and we've allowed students to instead explore, having a portfolio. And being able to submit work rather than having the same strict deadlines that they had before of, say, something due on a Friday. Now students can add in the pieces as they go and submit something towards the end. And so one of the things that we found was while the online environment can be stressful, that if we do a little bit of pre-planning, we can actually not only downplay some of the fears and anxieties that students would have in this environment, but we can also do that for students who are not experiencing those things, and it becomes a better overall issue. And so, when I look back a year and a bit ago when we started, we came in with an idea that we thought we knew what the pandemic would bring and what we needed to bring to it. We had already invested in looking at various online proctoring tools in order to create a secure and a safe test environment. And what we found was that within the first couple of months of doing those sorts of procedures and investing in our testing, was that it created nothing but more problems and more headaches and took away student agency. And so we've actually, over the last 8 months or so, changed our academic culture quite a lot in ULE, and begun to move away from formalized assessment and to a more open assessment approach with more dialogue and consultation and more student-directed learning. And I think that what we found is that while those things have been very positive, we still have a long way to go. There is a lot of issues still at play, I think, in our online environment, even a year later. That testing is still an issue, whether it's if there is students who have special abilities, being able to be tested for those is problematic already because we don't often have the language support, there. In an online environment, it's virtually impossible. And so listening to students and being empathetic to what their needs are and trying to build around that has proven to be very effective for us. That we still need to invest a lot in our training, not only with the actual practical skills of dealing with online, but also the human piece that comes around it, and being compassionate and hearing from different student voices. And so I will just throw this up here quickly for any of you who are interested in resources, and I'll throw up my contact information there as well if you do have any follow-up afterwards. And so thank you very much for allowing me to present with you today, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Okay, thank you, James, very much for insightful and wonderful presentation. Could you please share your email address in the chat box?
Will do, yep.
Okay, guys, if you have questions, so you can postpone your questions to all guest speakers till the end, please. And I will ask Mike now to share, if you could share your PowerPoint, please.
Yes, of course. Let's have a look. I think I'm sharing now.
Yes. Okay, guys, now it's time to listen to our third guest speaker, Dr. Mike Canteros. He's talking to us from Greece. And
Yes.
okay, let's introduce him to you just briefly. Dr. Mike is a professional educator and is a language school owner, passionate about integrating flipped learning through the use of active learning strategies, which empower student engagement and build strong learning communities. He has been a TESOL moderator for the flipped learning in language teaching session for the past 3 years. And his talk is, or presentation is about to transform your classes using the flipped learning approach. So the stage is yours, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here today with so many educators out there from all over the world, reaching all places from the globe. Something that I'm really happy about is I can actually feel that the order of the presentations that have been happening, from Sharon to James, I feel like that everything's just moving on where it should be. So this is really good. My name is Dr. Mike Canteros. Really quickly, I was born and raised in Melbourne, Australia, intending to live there all my life. So I took a gap year. I traveled around Europe to many places, and I came to this special island for me where my parents were born, Lesbos Island, and I just fell in love with the environment and the place. So I moved on. I started studying in the UK. I was there for about 4 or 5 years. And then when I had to decide where I'm going to go back and what I'm going to do, I actually chose Lesbos Island to be my main point around the globe. So I traveled a bit more, ended up doing another master's course here at the University of the Aegean, and moved on to do a PhD in mobile learning applications back in, I think I finished in 2010. So that was quite interesting. So I've always had a strong connection to technology and using technology in my classroom. And for the last 20 years, I've also had my own private language school, which I really enjoy waking up and coming to work every day because I feel this is what I do, and I really take pleasure from that. So moving on, just want to say something that James mentioned, the need for differentiated instruction. This is a quote from Rhonda Bondi from the Harvard Graduate School. It actually came to my email, which was talking about a short course, Differentiated Instruction Made Practical. And it really struck me that because of the pandemic, we used to say, okay, target the middle student and we'll get the top student and the lower performance student. But because of the pandemic and online teaching, that middle student no longer exists. They're either the top performing students who have become more autonomous learning, or more autonomous learners, more do it yourself and study and move and motivate myself. And we have the lower performing students that weren't really connected with online lessons, weren't really connected with technology, and they're struggling. So we have to take differentiated instruction quite serious, and there are many frameworks and approaches out there. One that I really enjoy using is differentiated instruction, Carol Ann Tomlinson. But obviously, universal design for learning now has been really picking up, and there are many ways you can differentiate your teaching literally without changing much of your teaching practice. So moving along, I just want to ask you if you agree or not. You can write it on the chat if you want, or you just think it in your head. It's perfectly fine. Yeah. I just want you to think about, can we really continue to teach the same as we did before the COVID pandemic? If we return to class at one stage, is it going to be the same? Students are going to expect the same thing we did before? I don't know. It's something to think about. Some people might say yes, some people might say no. I'm more towards, well, no. I don't know how many of you tried it or have been forced to try it. Hybrid classroom solutions. Do you think they're temporary solutions? Do you think they'll go away after the pandemic? Or do you think that hybrid, which means some students are online, some students are in the classroom, will slowly start coming back and prevailing in our teaching context, whether that's young learners, university, schooling, compulsory schooling, or just courses? Something to think about. Okay, moving on. Do you think, especially going through the pandemic and online and this unprecedented times and uncertainty of what's going on with the society and your community, do you think the student psychological programs have not been altered, have not been changed? Do you think that there are a lot of students out there that haven't suffered some sort of stress environment, or feeling anxious or having anxiety, or and that's coming out in their learning profile, for instance? I'm not sure. I've seen quite a lot. So going back to hybrid classrooms, do you think hybrid classrooms can be offered just like without changing some sort of your teaching style, without changing your environment? I think that's something to think about. That's something that the school organization should think about it on a higher level, and just slowly dropping it down to the teaching level as well. And also, do you feel that once we get back into the classroom, we will no longer need the use of digital platforms like James mentioned, the Moodle platform and a few others, and community platforms and what have you? Or do you think it'll increase even more, all these digital tech tools? So moving on, let me try see if I can answer a few of those. For me, I'm talking to you from a young learner, of English classroom, but I do have all ages. We do have courses for students, for adults, English for academic purposes, English for special purposes. But most of our teaching content comes between, the young learners. Exams, language exams for CFR, like we're a Cambridge English Assessment Preparation Center. As we're coming back slowly into our classes after 7 months of lockdown, and we can see quite a few changes. Firstly, of the demands of our students, and also how the teaching environment's changing as well. just moving along. I feel that hybrid classrooms will be around for quite a bit. Even now, where the pandemic hasn't really cleared, we do have certain situations where like 2-3 of our students are online because they came into contact with a COVID case and they have to be at home for 2 weeks in a lockdown situation, whereas the rest of the students go to school and they still are able to move around, so they come to class. And these are quite challenging. And if we kept our traditional, teacher-centered approach, we wouldn't be able to cope with these types of environments. So for me, the time is now to prepare for these types of classrooms, for next year. You have to look at how you're going to invest in technology. It could be just some sort of a school policy saying, BYOD, bring your own devices. It could be maybe schools that can afford invest in their own technology, maybe tablets, maybe computers, their laptops. And one big issue is training. I think even here at a smaller smaller scale, we did a lot of training with my staff. And the good thing about COVID, we had a lot of international trainers train our teachers, and there's a lot of good methodologies we learned, good approaches, and that really helped us open up and try different things. Okay, touching on students. This one was taken from the National Portrait Gallery from the UK. There was actually a photograph competition, and there was some really, intriguing photos out there, and I caught this one. Our students have been through a lot, and we really need to take that into account when we plan for our lessons. On the basis of differentiated instruction is taking into account student readiness, students' interests, and the way students learn. If they're kinesthetic, auditory, and stuff like that. So just because you see a student that's got their camera off, they're not really motivated to learn, you can't just automatically turn around and say, well, that student's lazy, that student's not interested. You have to really tap into that student's interests. You have to tap into why that student's got the camera off, like it was mentioned. Maybe they're even, I've had cases where they were embarrassed of their house, they're embarrassed of their room, or they had to, because of their Wi-Fi connection, they had to stay in the kitchen, and their mum was cooking at the same time. So, we have some background noise. There you go. Okay, so we have to keep that into account and really get into the basic of the background of what's going on with our students. And for me, teaching English is, I dare say this, teaching English for me is 70% building that connection with students, and 20% is going through the curriculum and the course, and because if you have that connection, they'll work really hard for you. They will enjoy their lessons, and that way you will see that they'll be motivated to come to class. So how do we prepare for hybrid classrooms, flexible classrooms where we might have both digital and physical spaces? Well, basically what I'm going to tell you now is basically we need to change mindset first as teachers, as organizations. We have to get over the teacher-centered approaches. We have to move more to student-centered approaches. As James mentioned, we have to move more to differentiated instruction, give them voice and choice. I use a course book, so I too have curriculum. I have school curriculum. I have course curriculum, but we also have what's in it for the student curriculum. Yeah, it's very important that I'm going to talk about that really quick in a minute, but it's really important for every lesson for students to know what's in it for them. Why are they coming to your class? What is it they have to understand from your class? Be a series of lessons, be just one lesson. What is it they have to know? And what is it they have to be able to do after your class? They should know this before. And, you know, we should use the types of mechanisms like pre-assessment, and assess what they actually know beforehand. You know, it's no use jumping straight into the course book for the nth time and say, let me teach you the present simple, and most of your students understand most of it, or maybe some students have got it muck mixed up. And there are a number of ways we can do that. So moving along, constructing learning as a collaborative task. This is something I found. I'm going to talk about it really quickly because I'm going to say it again. What I found over the pandemic with my students, we built a lot of fluency skills, but I found that their writing skills were lacking because we can't really check all the time. Are they writing the words? Are they writing their sentences? Are they, you know, documenting their work, or is it more fluency? So we had to find ways there where we could actually get them motivated enough to write. So, because of the title, let me just quickly run down through the fundamentals of the flip learning approach. Basically, talking about traditional classrooms, the teacher presents the material first. Maybe they do some practice through maybe using the course book, some fluency exercises, and then they produce language either orally or maybe using again their course book or a worksheet, so on and so forth. And then they go home in their individual space and they do some homework, whether it be something interesting, whether it be just a couple of exercises. And basically what we've seen is that a lot of the times the lower order thinking skills are done in the classroom because the teacher is using a lot of teacher talk time and presenting material, and then at home a lot of the higher order thinking skills are done in the individual space. So the flip learning classroom, what does that actually say is give students material in the individual space. I'm going to say material because a lot of people say, oh, flip learning, yeah, you make a video and you send it home and they watch the video and then they come to class. It might not be just a video. It could be even just a worksheet. It could be just reading the student's book, maybe a grammar point, maybe preparing the vocabulary. It could even be, like James said, give them choice. Let them investigate. You guys find a really cool video for pre-A1 level on colors. Come to school and they might bring a Go Noodle video, or they might bring a video tutorial which they found interesting. But think about how long they'll be looking for a proper YouTube video to bring it to class. So we flip the instructions, we get them preparing the work, the material, the presentation stage at home. Obviously, we do have mechanisms for accountability where we check if they've actually done the work. That could be just filling in some Cornell notes. It could be just filling in a worksheet. It could be some simple exercises depending on what with a target language or what you're going to the use of form, depending on what you're teaching. And when they come to class, that's where you have this flexible environment where you could use workstations, you could use the in-class approach, you use any type of active learning strategy which suits you. That could be like grammar games, it could be vocabulary games. There's so much out there, project-based learning, and that's where the magic happens. So, really quickly, we call it prepare work, we don't call it homework. They go home, they get prepared for the lesson, they come to class to be actively engaged, either both hybrid or online environments. We'll talk about that in a minute. Where they're building their language, they're building their fluency, their understanding, their knowledge, and what they're able to do. And also we have a stage where they check their own understanding, and I'm going to talk about that, saying Something what Sharon mentions is send me an email of the 5 things you learned today. Yeah, metacognition. We use exit slick routines, and I'll show you a really cool routine that we use, which is for online posting of what they've learned. And then we try to get them extending their learning, whether that be, you know, like I said, I too use a course book like most institutions do. Whether that might be just doing a couple of exercises at home, and obviously, again, preparing for the next lesson. So I really think you're wondering, how can we send the flipped learning content home? I'm not too sure. You're probably saying, well, I'm not too sure. What do we do with this group space time? You know, if I'm not teaching, what am I supposed to do? What's that notion of extending the learning? Yeah, so I'm going to touch on these 3 things now. I've only got a couple of minutes left. Well, multimodality, choice. You can use things like from differentiated instruction framework, Carol Ann Tomlinson, you can look her up. You can use like choice boards, learning menus, the idea of hyperdocs. Or you can use various tools like Nearpod to create a lesson when you're sending it home, Pear Deck. You can either curate a ready-made video. I tend to make my own videos, and I make these Mr. Mike's one-take videos, because even if I make mistakes, my students feel that it's more, it adds more meaning to them, like, oh, he made a mistake, that's interesting. And they really enjoy these one-take videos. But like I said, it just doesn't have to be a video. It could be a Google form where you're just giving some instructions and maybe a few multiple choice. It could be a worksheet. It could be some pages from the course book where you're just getting them to read the information, maybe getting them to reflect, making their own notes on some grammar points, or using the preparing for some sort of fluency activity. So there's a lot of tools out there. What do we do with the time and the space that we have in class? Well, there are many approaches and methodologies out there. I find they're you know, nerve-wracking and brain-breaking technologies and approaches. So I'm just going to name a few, but basically what I say is each teacher has their teaching style. Each teacher prepares for the lesson in a way they try to make it interesting. They try to use either they use, you know, their course book, or they use vocabulary, worksheets, or if they prepare things like tasks using, you know, the task-based learning approach, or maybe they use projects where they're creating authentic output. It could be like teaching grammar using various experiential methods or ways, in maybe using games. I tend to use the in-class flip approach, where I create workstations where in one workstation they have like a grammar activity, they've watched the video, or I have the video to watch in class. I also tend to have, I use it in a Google Doc, or I put it on my online platform, which I'll show you soon. And that's where I get my online students connecting, and they actually get into their own workstation. So if I have like 3 or 4 students online, I put them into a workstation on their own. That way they can move from workstation to workstation, as do the students in class. That creates a flexible environment. And I give them a lot of choice. So some of them, I depending on the students, they're learning the same content, but I vary the output. Like some students might do a couple of exercises on the course book. I might get some students to blog post, to write about and use the language they're learning. I might do some fluency activities. Sometimes I get the students that are in class to connect with students that are online, and they could use just their own phone through Zoom or. Okay. That's a nice bell. It's 20 minutes. I'm closing now. Just finishing off.
Could you please mute your mic, please?
Okay, really quickly now, what does assessment look like to me? Well, like I said, we use a lot of formative assessment because we feel, our teaching team feels that assessment should be used to see where the learner's at in reaching their goals. I really enjoyed what Sharon mentioned at the middle of the lesson, stopping and say, guys, what have you understood so far? And, you know, to see how close they are towards, you know, what the students should know, understand, and be able to do. We enjoy the use of exit slip routines, which I'll quickly show you now, the use of vocabulary notebooks to document their learning. And we've been using a lot of blog posting because that way we felt that students weren't really writing enough, even though we built a lot of fluency over online sessions. We felt that we couldn't see if they were really writing enough, and by using blog posting, and we do have a method we use. We get them to write in their notebooks first. They upload a photograph of what they've written. That way the teacher can check what they've written, and they get the green light to upload their blog post on our blog. So I'm just going to move along and say, to do all this, we had to use digital platforms. There are a lot of choices out there like Edmodo, Class Dojo, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, and so on and so forth. We felt it wasn't good enough. I had the knowledge of digital platforms, you know, having done a PhD, so I built my own. Based on just a WordPress site, and I tried to make students members of a community where we based the whole thing on students making and building their own, uploading their own blogs, having their own profiles where they're documented. We showcase our work. This is Junior A, Junior B showcase. We actually have students in their first year, like think of grade 2, K2, K3, where they're actually writing and blogging, and it would be really good if I could show you. This is about a weather report where they're learning about, you know, it's a sunny day, it's a hot day, it's a windy day, and what they're wearing. I'm wearing a t-shirt. So just before I close, I wonder if I could quickly share my screen. This is Kedu Space. You guys can log into it if you want. This is the latest blog about a camping trip. It's actually about a book written by Jenny Dooley from Express Publishing. Weather report. Here's Angelo's weather report. The weather is hot and sunny. You can click on it. You can read it. I'm just going to scroll down to Wilt. This is a learning routine we use for exit slips. What I learned today. So what we try to do is we get students to document, use their metacognition strategies to just tell us what they actually learn. And I'm going to indulge myself in clicking on Arjonia's Wilt. This was done on the 30th of May. And what I'm going to say is, it's not perfect. We're still work in progress. We're just a small school on Lesbos Island. And I really would have enjoyed reading you that today we learned about the environment, and it was really interesting, and we played games, and we talked about recycling, but it's not really to that yet. You know, today I and my classmate, that's fine, write dictation. After we check exercises, we learn reported questions. So this isn't what I really wanted to have here. They're still learning about what how metacognition and how we is about and what learning is really about. A lot of our students are still stuck on, we do exercises, we learn words, we learn grammar, and we're still trying to get them to do, what is it you actually learn about? What is it you're able to do with this knowledge? But we're getting there, yeah? Really quickly, just closing, I hope you can see the screen. We use a vocabulary notebook where they document their work. This is what I was telling you about writing. They created their own game as a project. This is the younger clauses. This student was learning the irregular verbs. So, we try to make it as interesting as possible so students enjoy themselves and have fun. So I hope you enjoyed the idea of the flipped learning in hybrid and online classes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike, for wonderful and insightful session.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thank you for all.
Thank you very much.
From
You
Honduras.
can share the link
Shalom.
if you want in the
Good luck.
chat.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Good luck. Shalom.
Okay, guys. So I would like to say thank you for our guest speakers. Now it's time for questions. Please, if you have questions, you can raise your hand.
Shalom.
You can raise your hand.
Good luck.
Okay, moderators, can you help me find this person? I mean, because I could not disable the mics from my side. I don't know now today what happened with Microsoft Teams.
That's all right. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but they are distracting. So please, moderators, if you are here, just spotlight this person and then mute him or her. Okay, guys. Now, if you have questions, you can raise your hand though, and then you can unmute yourself, and then you can address the question. Which of these guest speakers? Okay. I think that even the guest speaker can see the hands raised.
Yeah,
right?
I see one.
Okay. Okay, Mahash. Mahash. Can you hear me, please? Either you can write your questions in the chat box. They can follow you. Or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions.
There's a question there. How can we motivate the kids?
I think you can see questions in the chat box, guys. I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How can motivate the kids to encourage more with online?
As I teach mostly adults, Mike, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah. Basically, you have to. I find that I look at my course book, I look at what I'm going to, the theme of the topic, because, we follow a course book, and then I say, how can I make it interesting for them? Just recently, we had a section in one of the Express Publishing books. It was a pre-A1 level. A1, Cambridge Movers, where they were visiting Yosemite Mountain in California. And it just had this photo, it had like a sort of a forum post where they've never seen forums before. And I thought, Jesus, these aren't, wow, these kids aren't really going to understand what Yosemite Mountain's all about and what happens. So what I did in the preparation stage, I got them to prepare for a camping trip. And I told them, you guys are going to be team leaders at Yosemite Mountain Adventure Park, and I got them to put chairs up and have the a sheet like they're in a tent, and they had to have a camp light with them, so you can understand automatically how excited they all were to come to the next class. And we watched some YouTube videos about Yosemite Mountain. They saw how beautiful the park was, and we saw a couple of kids on YouTubing about activities in adventure parks. And they understood the notion of summer camps and what it means to be team leaders, and we talked about it, and then we blogged about it. So, you know, they really enjoyed it, and they thought it was relevant and meaningful for them. So my advice is, what's in it for them? When you plan your lessons, don't plan, I have to teach this week, that next week, and what do students have to know, understand, and do after this session or sessions?
Could I add a little bit?
Yes.
Yes.
What I wanted to say was, watching Mike in action, you can see the energy. And he said one phrase, he said, this is where the magic happens. And this is the truth. You have to create magic. You have to be imaginative, and it is the strong force of your personality as a teacher which motivates students. However, I have to say that we have a certain amount of energy and we can't kill ourselves. So that there is that fine balance between using a lot of energy and creating magic for your students, but also keeping in mind that you have a lot of students and you have to pace yourself as well. And the other thing is, we have a saying in English, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Sometimes I find with adult students, it doesn't matter what you do. You cannot always motivate them, because really, talking about adults, they should be motivating themselves. They should understand why there is a need. And therefore, if we can explain to them why they need to learn, perhaps we can get them to motivate themselves as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, James, would you like to say something?
You know, I think just the way you motivate, I think students is to try to come up with you know, a sticky way of making the material, you know, something that will stay in mind, you know, and whether that's by taking a different approach, I think the flipped classroom makes a lot of sense. Or, you know, whether it's trying a different modality, you know, experimenting with something else. You know, I'm always looking into new spaces. I think there's a lot of potential with augmented reality, and especially while we're online, and being able to get students to see something physical. I mean, one of the things that I think the online environment doesn't provide is it's somewhat limiting. We only see each other's talking heads, and so whenever we can try to make it more immersive and more collaborative, I think it's going to lead to more success.
Okay, thank you. I think Mahash wrote the question in the chat box. Okay, where the community leaders, okay, it's for James, I think. Were community leaders not affected by the pandemic?
Not particularly. I mean, everyone, of course, was affected by the pandemic to some extent. We all have loved ones who you know, got sick, and maybe we've had you know, worse, of course. But our community leaders themselves, you know, they're online just like everyone else, and in many cases they're in residence, so they're actually quite restricted on where they can go, and so it was a bit of an outlet for them. If I'm being honest, the environment was different than what they normally would be experiencing. Normally they'd be meeting face to face and perhaps engaging in some sports or some games, but because they were in residence and they were in there, you know, with limited access to other things, I think they found it quite an outlet to be able to talk with other students, and you know, it seemed to be something that would de-stress them as well.
Okay, thank you. I think, okay, there is one hand raised. Okay, yes, Ms. Archana, please. Can you hear me, Archana? Archana?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, of course.
Okay, I have 3 questions for all the 3 speakers today based on the topic that you dealt. To Ms. Sharyn, how do you teach pronunciation, especially now that you're online and you're not able to, explain your lip movements or your tongue or your gestures through your hand? So how do you make it easy for your students? The next question is to Mr. James. Will there be a need for a new certification to train teachers to teach special needs students? And my third question would be to Mr. Mike. Since you are teaching young learners, how do you make sure that they get the spellings right, especially when they have to type an answer? Thank you.
I'd be very happy to go first and to say that if you ask me the question, is there any difference teaching pronunciation online and offline? I would say there is not, because you need to see my face, you need to see my lips, and you need to hear my pronunciation. And I need to do the same with you. So in some ways it's better because you see my face more. So I really love teaching pronunciation online, and with the methods and the materials which I have, well, I have a great time. I actually feel that magic does happen online with pronunciation. So I have no problems whatsoever. I think that's the answer to my question. But please ask me more about it.
Okay, James, please.
Yeah, I think the question of whether there should be special training, I think yes, and I think there is, but I also think that there's some value, over the years that I've been teaching, I've had the pleasure of meeting a variety of different teachers, and some have had hearing impairments or visual impairments, and that sort of universal design that we were talking about earlier comes into play when you hear about some of the challenges from people and the ways that they've adapted their teaching because of the experiences that they've had. I think it's important to hear those stories. I think it's part of our teaching, community, and by hearing those, experiences, I think you can kind of plot a course as well. It's not going to be perfect. And there isn't sort of one size that fits all, but the more voices that we hear around those topics, I think the better.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Mike? Okay,
well, just a quick and easy tip. During the pandemic, we had these little whiteboards, and we told our kids' parents to come past, and we just gave them to them. Like that. That's why you can see it's a bit mashed up now, because they had someone at home. But even the kids that didn't have whiteboards, we found some from the stationery shops, some black plastic covering. They covered their exercise book, and they could write with chalk, and that was interesting for them. So one way we checked it with, the traditional maybe spelling approach is we played games and they had to write the proper word or a sentence, or they had to create a question and maybe rub out one of the words where they played it in pair works and stuff like that. So there are many ways, and basically it was one way for them to open up their cameras as well. If it's interesting for them, they won't care about their environment, yeah? They won't feel embarrassed or anything. They'll just want to play the game. So there are ways. Keep your creativity open. I think with a lot of young learner teachers is that creativity is flowing and the energy should be there, and you will find ways to reach every student.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I saw Lubna. Lubna, are you still here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, I'd love to thank the organizers for this interesting event. I hope my voice is well clear.
Yes.
Yes.
And I'd also love to thank our speakers and to say hi to Sharon. We met at EduFest UK, if you remember.
I recognize your name. Hi,
nice to see you here.
Wonderful.
Good to see
Will
you
there
too.
be
Thank you.
ELT teaching?
Yeah. Well, actually, I have two questions. The first question is to Dr. Mike. So it's about the wealth, which I loved. I love the idea, and especially this aspect of metacognitive mechanisms that this activity can enhance at the learners. So my question is, do you think it is applicable to adult learners, especially for ESP, for example, because I'm teaching ESP, English for specific purposes and academic purposes. So do you think how successful is this for adult learners?
Okay.
The second question is for everyone, and it's about how do you think it's possible to train teachers, because I have the responsibility to train teachers to use digital tools and to use different platforms and to teach online, either blended, hybrid, or flipped classrooms, so all types of different approaches to online learning and teaching. So any ideas, or do you think we need, in what sense we can do training for teachers in this regard? Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to speak first. And I'd like to say, when I started teaching Zoom, so just a personal reflection here, I was not very good digitally. And speaking to the two speakers this morning, I gave them my opinion to say, my generation expects things to go wrong, whereas the new generation expects everything to work technically and digitally very, very well. Yeah. I have always been very nervous about technology, and I think our teachers need to learn it. They need to learn it quite quickly, but they need to be taken hand by hand, take their hands through it and build up their confidence, because it seems really difficult at first, but actually it's not difficult, but it's all about having the ability and having the confidence to use technology. And that comes with a lot of repetition and a lot of practice. So I think the biggest thing is patience. Yes. And allowing our teachers to develop and making them feel important and making them feel that they matter and that we will help them at every stage, and that they are not alone in this process. I think that's very important, because actually we are quite alone in our little offices teaching, but to know that you belong to a community where people can help you is very, very important. So I hope I've answered your question there a little bit, Lubna, just by saying technology is not easy at first, but it gets easier the more confident we become.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes.
James?
Well, yeah, I think, one of the best teacher training that you can do is to simply try to form a community of practice. I think for many of us, the feeling of being isolated and separated has been difficult, but one of the affordances of the pandemic and being online is that it's removed quite a few barriers, and we can now meet with people all over the world. And so why not take the opportunity to grow your network, because every time you expand that a little, you add strength. And I think it's one of the easiest ways of hearing about new things, new technologies, new techniques and tips, is to simply broaden your horizons. And so I would say that's the best thing to do, is to develop a really strong community of practice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Saying that, I really cherish my personal learning network. I have teachers from all over the world. Like I mentioned, like Faisal mentioned, I'm a TESOL International EVO moderator with the Flip Learning and Language Teaching approach. So we have, daily conversations with teachers from Bogota, Colombia, from Argentina, from all over the world. Yeah, and that increases your chances to learn new things and share and talk about new ideas and try in your classroom and so on and so forth. Saying that, I have a small teaching team. I have another 6 teachers, and as being a director of studies, I want I want to be able to, you know, from top down to design new things and get all my teachers trying it. So nowadays we use like maybe monthly or depending on the season and stuff. We have one session a month, or you know, if not more, where we get our teachers on Zoom. They don't even have to come to school anyway. And you know, our distances are close. So if you're talking about other places, I think they cherish that. And we do what we call teachers care, teachers share. So each session, our teachers present something that worked in class. And WILT was something one of my teachers tried, and we worked around it, and we made a methodology of how it should be used, and we all started using it as a team. So I would say is get your teachers involved, because if you just say, guys, this is what you're going to do next week, if you're not observing all your teachers' classes, you never know how each teacher you know, translates that or mediates that sort of guidance. I found that the COVID, one of the things I found is a lot of overloading. You attended so many online sessions that if you didn't say, well, from this session, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to document it, and I'm going to see how it goes, and talk about it, maybe blog about it, you end up saying, well, that was a lot of cool stuff today, but as the days goes by, obviously you're losing less and less, and you never have time to try it. For English for academic purposes, what I tend to do is, because I teach IELTS online and OET for doctors, and I do tend to have even a theme or course for my sessions. For instance, it could be about environmental problems. It could be about really quickly. I think I had. Oh, and what we do, apart from WILT, we have a forum. And, you know, this stage, these are younger age students, but how do friendships affect lives? This is just something of a reflection task. How do friendships affect lives? And I gave them a few ideas, and then I got my students, reflecting on that. And they were just talking about friendships and what's happening, and they're, you know, in a forum. So I do find that all students can reflect on what they learned. I really enjoyed Sharon's 5 things you learned today. That was a really cool routine. I'm definitely going to try that. So it's just getting them to stop and reflect. It's not easy. They're not used to that. They're going to say, okay, bye teacher, I'll see you next week, and I'll do your homework. Where if you start getting them more involved, it becomes more meaningful for them as well.
I would say getting over the fear of technology is a massive thing. I've just written down here, we have Teams, Google Hangouts, Zoom, Blue Button, Skype, just to name a few. And then, as you say, we have overload with webinars and podcasts. We've all had too much in our heads. But I think reflection is incredibly important, but also just helping your teachers to get over the fear that once they can use one platform, another platform is not going to be so difficult. Just go through it step by step and create an environment where everybody feels safe to ask questions and doesn't feel stupid or think that they're asking a stupid question. In that lovely, warm situation, teachers will thrive.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Lubna. Okay, Salman. I think Salman could you please unmute yourself and ask the question? Salman.
Yes, please, sir. I have already. Yes, I can hear you. I've already written the question in the chat box about that.
Would you like to say it, or is this your
for
question?
Everyone. Yeah, sure.
Don't you find is this your question? Don't you find differentiated learning more time-consuming than ever? Is this your question?
No, my question was, how can we make the class fascinating for those students who don't pay attention towards their studies, especially in online classes?
Could you repeat that, please?
How?
Yes, my question was, how can we make the class more fascinating for the students who do not pay attention, especially in online classes?
Oh, it's a huge question, and it depends on the age of your students very much. Because you do things with young ones that you wouldn't do with older ones, and you do things with older ones that you wouldn't do with younger ones. But personally, great preparation and your own personality. You are the leader, you are the engager. And so imagination, creativity, these are the things which engage students. But at the end of the day, try your best. And if some students are still not engaged, it's not always your fault. That's what I wanted to say. But just by showing your passion, other people feel your passion. If you show your energy, your enthusiasm, other people feel that and become that way as well. That's how I feel about it. I don't know what the others think.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Sharon, on that. I think,
Yes.
you know, if you bring your energy into it and you bring your interest, then you know, students are going to respond in kind. I don't think there ever really is a student that is wanting to be completely not motivated. It's just finding that answer. I think back to I had a student prior to the pandemic who was you know, asleep all the time in class and so forth. And, you know, it's only once we, you know, had a project that involved robotics that he suddenly, you know, became the most engaged student in the group. I don't know if you're always going to find that thing that unlocks these moments, but I think it's important to keep searching for them because, you know, nobody wants to be disengaged.
I agree with Sharon and James. For online learning, I would just add breakout rooms. You know, jump straight into pair work, get them reflecting on what their week was like, get them talking to their, you know, near peers. Yeah. That way, even the weaker students will actually open up. Even the students that, you know, seem to always have connection problems suddenly work. Their microphones suddenly work. And one thing I also suggest is look up flipped instructions. A good source for that is Martha Ramirez, Flipped Instructions, where you write down your instructions of what the task is about, even if it's a speaking task. You give them roles, you give them the steps, you give them the deliverables, you give them useful language for, you know, language learning context, and you go for it. You've got 5 minutes to deliver this task, because a lot of the time online is we give our instructions and they say, oh, I didn't understand that, Mr. Mike. And you give your instructions again, and then, can you repeat that? I didn't get that. And you give it again and again. And it's like, oh my God, there goes 10 minutes of my time. So if you start flipping your instructions and try to put it into, you know, canva.com, some neat infographic style, they're really into it. And I saw something, you know, doesn't differentiation take a lot of time? It does and it doesn't, because you start preparing a lot of work and you can recycle a lot of your work. And, you know, if you're not dumbing down, you never, you know, one of the main points of differentiated instruction from Carol Ann Tomlinson, so I should reference that, is don't change the content. The content should be the same for all. It's the way they reach the goal of achieving the knowledge and the understanding that changes, or the deliverables. So because, you know, and obviously don't overload the stronger students. You know, if they're early finishers, maybe have a workstation where they can do some independent work, maybe get them to help other students, and things like that can help as well. So there are ways. You just have to chase after them and use your creativity.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
it's been harder for teachers during the pandemic. I think we've had to work a lot harder, but we will see the rewards of our work because, as you say, we can recycle, we can reuse material, but we have had to work very hard at changing our methods and changing the way we engage our students. It has been very hard. And that's why I say sometimes you can't try too hard because we always have to think about teacher burnout as well. You know, you can't kill yourself. Just pace yourself as well. That's very, very important.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. I think we have Maria. Maria, can you please hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for this wonderful seminar. I would like to ask some questions and suggestions from our dear speakers. First, from Ms. Shelley. Ms. Shelley, may I ask, how do we engage students? Because you have actively told us to encourage students to open their camera. I would love to do that too in my class, but being here in Oman, students do not want to. They don't want to expose their face, especially the girls. So could you please give us suggestions how we can engage them even though their cameras are closed? And for Dr. Mike, I ask, you have mentioned about exit sleep. I would like also to know how my students understand the lesson. But if I did that when I had my Google Classroom, but they did not participate, maybe they would like to protect themselves and their identity. They would like to be anonymous. So could you give us suggestions and how we can ask them to tell what their problems are in their class without them revealing who they are, meaning not telling their classmates that these are their weaknesses. And for Mr. James, may I ask for your suggestions on how we can do differentiated learning while we are time bound? Let's say, for example, in a week's time, how can we achieve an objective during a week's time when we do and conduct differentiated learning? Thank you very much.
Okay, well, Miriam, I'll take your question first. And I have to tell you that I'm almost in shock because I had no idea that women would not turn their cameras on for fear of somebody taking a photograph of them or for fear of somebody staring at them. This is culturally very, very new to me, and now I understand very much. I would say that's incredibly hard on women because as a teacher of pronunciation, I need to see people's lips. And I need to see people's facial expressions and their body language. So that is incredibly hard for me. I think it's a big cultural, a big political, and a big managerial problem. Small solutions. What I can think of is perhaps after the session that you speak to the women as a group. Maybe you have a live Facebook chat or something like that where you can see their faces, but also. And maybe Mike with his technology can help out here. Surely in these days of Zoom, there is the possibility that we can see a student when other people can't see that student. Now that would be fantastic because that would mean that I could see a student's lips move, but nobody else could. So I'm actually going to put that out to the startup community and ask them if there is any way that I can see a student online when other students can't see them. I feel your problem, and I think it's a massive problem, and I hope some way we can overcome it.
Breakout rooms.
Yeah, there's
Put
the
them in breakout
possibility.
rooms.
Female, yeah.
Yeah, design your lessons using workstations, flexible environments where each members or communities, the micro communities are working on their own pace on something that's relevant to them, something that's compulsory to them, and take the advantage of that 5-10 minutes you have and put them into a breakout rooms and get them opening their cameras and in a private breakout room.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. That's brilliant. Yep.
And so that's the whole idea of using the flipped learning approach and using flexible environments where you're using, the instructions already made. They've studied the presentation stage at home and they're coming to class and they're working either in pair work, small groups. Yeah, obviously it takes a lot of time to plan, but not that much. Once you start getting used to it, I spent the first 2 years of understanding flip learning, reading and trying and getting hold of all these ideas. And then slowly, I spent the last 3 years doing stuff, and I thought, geez, this is getting easier and easier. So the only thing I say is, sorry, but preparing lesson plans is part of our work. So find the time, when you would have done it anyway, and just try new things step by step. Start with one thing. Don't flip a whole class. Flip just one thing, maybe a grammar point. Try 1, 2 workstations, breaking up into pairs, or into a breakout room activity. And I had problems with exit routines too. It's not just give this instruction, hey guys, let's do exit routines, and everyone's going to jump on it. No. What I did is I took the last 20 minutes of my first sessions, and we did exit routines in class. And we used Google Forms, where anonymously they could obviously write the name, and the results only are showed to the teacher. The whole idea of blogging, or the whole mentality of our school of showing your student work, getting your students proud of what they're writing, it takes time, obviously. But even a junior A, where first year of learning English, second grade or first grade of school, where they start writing I am, and they're really proud of it, and it could be a drawing. But like Sharon said, the digital natives, so they know how to take a photograph and upload it to a blog using a WordPress. It's something that they see it the first time, and then second, third time around, they'll do it themselves. And also, yes, sometimes parents do cringe. Why do we have to upload, and why do we have to use technology? No, you don't have to use technology. Your student does, your child does, because it's part of their life. Think of it just after the pandemic, how much these digital skills are going to be so useful. So keep at it and slowly build your cachet of games and activities and methodologies.
Yeah, I think it's always about building up your toolbox and knowing when to use what tool. I was going to say about the differentiated learning, but I think Mike's already touched on it. Is that really it's about foreplanning and pre-planning, and once you have an idea of your class and what the needs are of that group, I think it becomes easier. You begin to predict what will be needed as you create your lessons for the week. So I think there is an initial investment of time, but it pays off down the road.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions? I think I found one question. One more. Okay. Okay, I think, okay, I can leave the question from the chat box. Okay, what changes we need to make for authentic assessment? Because traditional assessment methods have loopholes and online situation.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we jumped in, with online proctoring systems. In fact, that was something we were doing just before the pandemic, and we ended up going through 3 or 4 different companies. And I think at the end of the day, what we found was that our old methods of assessment were not going to be adequate to the challenge, right? That they were always going to be somewhat flawed, and that. Really, the expectation of preventing cheating, I suppose, is a losing battle when you have technology that can certainly counteract that. And so, I think it's important to, rather than having a standardized assessment, although those are important too, bringing in the creativity and allowing the students' voice to shine in their work. I think can help you to recognize whether it's authentic assessment or not, authentically theirs anyways.
We've got a funny story. It happened just the other day. We're getting prepared for an international English exam, and in the speaking part of the exam, they prepare for a 2-minute talk. And one of the questions was, which one of my students chose, do you believe your generation is luckier than the previous generations? And, you know, talking to the student, you know, you have to have some sort of a thematic topic, a topic sentence, and then you're going to give an example, and then, you know, and go over and justify it. And, well, this kid started going for it. Yeah, we're so lucky. Our generation is so lucky. We had the pandemic and we had online lessons. For example, in maths class, we had a test and we all connected on Facebook Messenger online, and one person wrote the answer and we all copied it. We're so lucky. It was like, oh my God. Yeah,
That's exactly it.
You know, from that, we underestimate our kids, all ages. They're so smart. They're so bright. They're really good problem solvers. So for one summative assessment task, there are going to be 3 or 4 solutions to cheat. And, you know, I agree with James, more authentic output, more meaningful output, you know, maybe project-based learning, using formative assessment, you know, all through all stages of the learning, and getting them to feel proud of what they're doing. And that's for all subjects, not just for English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would say that children are extremely smart at finding the answers in an answer book. One of the things I do when I get a new textbook which contains answers is to say, would you tear out the answers, please, and give them to your mummy or daddy? Because you see them flipping through looking for the answers. Kids are just so clever. And on the one hand, you have to say, well, that was smart, but I can't allow it, unfortunately. Yeah. But kids will find a way. Also, although it's very hard, one-to-one training, one-to-one assessment, if you've got time, even a small amount of time, just to listen to your students gives you a fantastic idea of how well they are doing, but not in writing, of course.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, you can see one hand raised. I don't know if you have time allow.
I've got time.
It's okay, James, Mike?
Yeah, I've got a bit of time.
Okay. Farhad? Farhad, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Yeah, yes.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you for this opportunity. It's nice to see you all here. I actually have 2 questions. My first question is about conducting quizzes in online sessions. We are in Iraq and we are now uploading lectures to the online system, and we are using different platforms and different systems. Each university has its own system.
Yeah.
And we have a problem actually, you know, when we have, let me say, online sessions with our students, we haven't had a chance to do quizzes, to take quizzes actually, because we are afraid of, you know, cheating and some kind of stuff. Can you tell us some strategies for taking quizzes and, you know, doing some other activities during the online session? And another problem is that we have students in remote areas and they haven't had the internet, or the internet service is very limited. What should I do for those students? And, you know, they're from poor families or they're from villages. Actually, you know, it is a kind of, let me say, you know, mixed. You know, some students, you know, have the internet in the cities, some others do not have.
Yeah, that is a huge challenge, that's for sure. And I think one of the things is that we found with the pandemic is technology and access to technology has created even greater barriers for those that don't have the same access as others. I would say if there's a possibility, I know here, you know, in primary school, some of the teachers will try to reach out to children in rural settings and give them some of the material, you know, in other formats and paper-based, formats. And so if that's a possibility, I know that's an imposition, but maybe there's a way to connect with those students that doesn't involve quite the same amount of resources.
Yeah, good point.
And you could flip your content, make a few presentations using a YouTube video. That way, for students that don't have good connections, they could be like mobile, go to a place where they offer a free Wi-Fi and just log into YouTube, where it's easy on their phones, and maybe follow your presentations, take a few notes. You mentioned that you can check accountability using, a lot of ready-made platforms out there. I tend to use quizzes nowadays, where I actually make slides, where I put my presentations or videos in there and have like a few quiz underneath, talking about it. And then I could even get them either blog about it, obviously, or send me an email. And that way there's a lot of options you have to help even the students that do have difficulties with connections and technology. It's very difficult, and I really find that these students that have these types of difficulties, like I have students working through a little screen on their phone for months, and I'm saying, wow, what I found though, they really build learner autonomy and their need to learn, and these students actually come out stronger when they get back into the classroom. So that's something really good to think about.
And I agree with both of those things. Sorry, it's a little bit hard. There's some interference there, but what I would also say is that we need to find a way is the answer. And whatever that way will be, and it could be that you contact these students personally, you talk to them more online, you talk to them more through email. It's whatever you find which works is what you have to do. And that has been our problem in the pandemic, our challenge, just to be more creative, to reach those. It's very easy to have 20 students in front of you and deliver a lecture or give a talk, but we need to do so much more than that now. So the answer is there is a way. You can find it, but it takes more effort. And as for quizzes, well, it depends how important the quiz is. A quiz can be, normally a quiz is for fun. And there are thousands out there, and I think Mike will be able to talk more about quizzes, but quizzes are great, but they're not the end of the world if you don't put quizzes online.
No.
So don't worry about quizzes.
Yeah, it is a kind of requirement from the universities, actually. You're talking about, university students, and we have another problem, which is, about the number of students. Sometimes, we have more than 100 students, 200 students online.
Right.
It's difficult, to engage them into different activities. And sometimes someone is online, someone is offline, and they are saying, oh, teacher, I'm online. Someone, oh, I'm offline. Can I join? They have so many. I'm actually focusing on, I'm talking about university students.
Right.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah. That is quite a crazy situation, to be honest with you. 100 students. How do you engage 100 students? Big challenge. Some of the things I went through in my guidelines, set out your guidelines very much in the beginning, and then try your best. And use every facility you have and find out what works for you and what doesn't. That's my answer.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your point. Thanks for your answers.
Okay, guys, I think it's time now. So on behalf of English Language Center, University of Technology and Applied Sciences, Ibri-Oman, would like to say a big thank you for our guest speakers from UK, from Canada, from Greece, for being for us today and give a wonderful presentation.
Hey, Vance.
And Vance is here. Okay. Thank you, Vance, for joining us from Malaysia. Okay.
I wouldn't miss it. My pleasure.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah.
And
Thank
okay.
you very much.
Thank you for everyone.
Nice seeing everyone. Sharon, James, pleasure meeting you.
And
It was a
you
pleasure.
too. Wonderful.
It's
Yeah,
our
I'll
great
be in touch.
pleasure and honor to have you all. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay then. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Quick screenshot.
Mm.